Hey, Sens fans, welcome to season 4, episode 29 of the Senstennial Podcast. And this week, wow, we have a lot to discuss. Obviously, a lot has gone down since the draft. We're going to be covering all of it from the Alex Debrincat trade, which obviously was the largest transaction this offseason and the most recent. We're going to talk about Joonas Korpisalo's big deal with the Ottawa Senators. And then in the second half of the show, we're going to talk about Zack MacEwen signing with Ottawa, Jake Sanderson and whether he may get extended long term this summer. And then we'll talk about Tarasenko and the rumors surrounding him. So, right off the bat, we'll bring up the Alex Debrincat trade. So, as we all know, the rumors were he had submitted a short list of teams he's willing to sign an extension with. Pierre Dorion went out. He surveyed which teams were interested. It seems like the final three in the running were the Islanders, the Anaheim Ducks, and of course, the Detroit Red Wings. And as we all could imagine, the Michigan kid, he wants to go back home. So we all knew Detroit was at the top of that short list. And sure enough, the details came out that that was essentially really the only team him and his agent would talk to concerning a long-term contract, even though it ended up being 4 years at just a hair over 7.8 mil. But in return, Ottawa gets 27-year-old pending UFA Dominik Kubalik, who is signed for this following season at 2.5 mil. They get prospect Donovan Sebrango, who has ties to the Ottawa area. We know that Dorion loves prospects and players with those ties. Ottawa gets a 2024 conditional first-round pick, so essentially it'll be the lower of either the first-round pick of Detroit or Boston's first-round pick that Detroit is in possession of, and then a 2024 fourth-round pick that's Detroit's. So that's the big trade. We'll start out with that. I'll kick it off to Benet. And Benet, how did you feel about this trade?
Yeah, it's I mean, first of all, what a time for this trade to break, at like 8 p.m. on a Sunday. I was standing in the middle of the Tegan and Sarah concert at Blues Fest alongside Mitch, friend of the show, and he and I were manically refreshing Twitter in between songs. It was a time, and it felt like the longest gap between a trade being announced and the details breaking that I've seen in a while. So they kept us all on tenterhooks there. But I mean, listen, the Sens had very little leverage in this situation. I think, we had the option of hanging on and, forcing him to stay here seemingly against his will for one more season. If we had just qualified him and kept him around for a year, try and flip him at the deadline, I think it's better for the vibes of the team and for everybody to just move on when, the player wants to move on. And as you alluded to, with him wanting to go back home to Michigan, it seems like the Sens didn't have a lot of leverage here. So we got what we got. If anything, we got a better return for him now than we paid to get him. So I guess that's something. But a little underwhelming. I think Kubalik is a middle six forward with some talent and some upside that could help this team, but it's hard to not see it as a downgrade because we're not getting a player of any one of Debrincat's caliber coming back, which sucks. Obviously, if we want to try and fill that hole in the top six, we're kind of going to need to do it through free agency, which also sucks because that's the worst way to try and fill holes in your lineup, because you're always going to overpay and get guys who are left over from other organizations. It's just not a good time, but is what it is. Had to move on from the guy, sad as it is. And I just want to sit here because I've seen some of the chatter about this. Much as I'm saying that this return is underwhelming and it sucks that we're losing Debrincat after only a year, Dorion has got to pull that trigger on that trade last summer like 10 times out of 10. It's so rare to be able to acquire a player of Debrincat's quality, and much as you might want to drag the guy right now, he's a quality forward. And to acquire him for a few draft picks, including a top 10 one, but that we didn't really seem that interested in order to get a guy of his caliber and his scoring ability, is a move that you've got to make. And you try and make it work and try and sign the guy, and you can rag on Dorion for a lot of things, and believe me, I'm going to, but I'm not going to knock him for taking a swing on a guy like Debrincat. You gotta take those flyers.
Yeah, and I was saying it on Discord earlier today to someone. I said I would rather a GM who takes a gamble on star players and it ends up not panning out than having a GM who sits idly by while some big stars get traded. And
Yeah,
total respect for a guy like Brian Murray. But it goes back to the whole thing with Eugene Melnick, and I know he had to clear the money with him first, but where it could have been a 1-for-1 CC for Taylor Hall, situations like that. I remember Jonathan Drouin was apparently a rumored return in a Cody CC deal. And these are guys, and obviously Jonathan Drouin and Taylor Hall have not had uh like amazing careers. I would say Taylor Hall's has been solid, but not a ton of success. But they're deals where I think as a GM, you got to roll the dice. And it's like the Jack Eichel situation before he was traded out of Buffalo. I said Dorion should just roll the dice, go with it. Yes, there were medical concerns, but now the dude's a Stanley Cup champion. Was it all him?
Yeah.
No, of course not. But I would rather my GM try and go out and acquire a big name like that and it not work. And people, will shoot back. Yeah, well, it's a gamble and it didn't work. I'm like, that's the point. It's a gamble. And he banked on the fact that that Debrincat would come in, be like, yo, this is a young core. They're on the up. I want to be with these guys for the next 8 and see where this thing goes. And unfortunately, he had a new child. Him and his wife having the newborn, being in Canada after being in the US their whole lives. I'm sure it was a tough personal change for their lives. And I can't blame them for wanting to go back to Michigan. Does that mean that I'm totally happy with the outcome? No, of course not. I think that the trade was, like you said, Benet, underwhelming. But at the end of the day, like, it's a personal decision. And some of his comments afterwards, again, wasn't a big fan of. But I'm sure the reaction when he comes back to Ottawa will be quite interesting in October. But anyway, I want to get to you, Matt. And what were your reactions when this trade went down?
I think you have to look at it as, move on from a depreciating asset before it's depreciated to the point that it's no longer valuable. And I get it. Like, Debrincat's a good player and like he's always going to have value. But as the season goes on, I feel like his value wouldn't have been higher at this point or 2 days before the trade deadline. And what if you're in a playoff spot? Like, is being your own rental and going into the playoffs and knowing that he's leaving, is that a risk that, most GMs are willing to take? Absolutely not. Because, unfortunately, like winning has a cost. And I don't think the Sens are sort of at that position right now. We got, top 9 forward, a first round pick, a middling prospect, and a 4th back. Obviously the centerpiece of the deal is a first round pick. Then it's Dominik Kubalik, who hasn't scored less than 15 goals in his NHL career thus far. He's on a decent a 1-year contract left at $2.5 million. He'll probably fit in, barring any moves going forward, as our second line left winger. Is that a downgrade from Alex Debrincat, the 2-time 40 goal scorer? Yeah, absolutely it is. But at the same time, you have to look at it from the perspective of like, this guy wasn't gonna stay here. Like that's the unfortunate part, because I really wanted him to. And then his comments today, saying that I never was going to sign in Ottawa long term or sign in Ottawa in general. It's like I couldn't get a feel for a place over a year. I'm like, dude, okay, all right, just don't answer the question if you're going to cap on track that much, So it is what it is. Like he's a good player. He scores quite a bit of goals. And I was a fervent Alex Debrincat stan when he was here, because I wanted him to stay. I wanted him to blow up. And like he had a good year last year, and it was a down year, but tell me that any of you would take him over either Brady Tkachuk or Tim Stützle. You can't.
No.
There's no. So this guy is your third guy, if that. Okay, if that.
Yeah.
He wasn't better than Claude Giroux was last year, and him and Batherson were battling it out for the green jacket of the NHL with being crappy defensively. And quite frankly, like
it took me a second, but that's good.
Yeah, let's add Josh Norris to that mix. You just added a defensively sound center who scored 35 goals. And I'm just saying, like, is Alex Debrincat more valuable than that?
I personally think that just because Norris is a year removed from those results and has the injury history does, for me right now, and the sample size, Debrincat's the better player. And I know some people would highly contest that, but I just think that Norris definitely has the potential to be a better player than Debrincat as an all-around forward. But if you're looking purely at like statistical analysis of both players, for me, the sample size of Debrincat is much larger.
He's absolutely more established.
The consistency and they established the age. They're very close in age. So to me, it's really like Josh Norris can get there, but I think today Debrincat's the better player. And also he had abhorrent defensive results this year, which were totally out of whack from his career norm. Yeah. And so I think even if he returns to his average, he's better defensively than a lot of star forwards in this league. So that was also super frustrating, but I digress anyway. I'll let you continue your point.
Just a point about that though. I mean, like we talked about like Alex's, like had a hard time adjusting to life in Canada. Can we chalk up his defensive woes to not understanding the metric system and not knowing where the lines are in relation to each other when we have to count in meters instead of feet?
Maybe he thought minus 31 was like actually 75 degrees.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, and it's just like, I mean, listen, we can turn on to the most important topic of the Alex Debrincat discussion in a moment, which is, are you team boo or team not boo? But I'm just gonna say, if like the biggest problem that this dude had was, not knowing how much 4 liters of milk is at the grocery store because it's not measured in, fucking quarts or whatever, then it's like, maybe this isn't a guy that needs to be part of our core.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to disagree with you. He's like, wait, it's bagged here?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The big debate. I remember there was like that Blue Jays pitcher or whatever who was all about that. He came to Canada. He's like, bagged milk?
And it's only an Ontario thing.
Yeah, which is also peculiar. But anyway, all I was gonna say on that is like, for me at least, like I could understand, having to get potentially like new bank, new accounts for everything. Housing market in Canada is definitely not as friendly as in the States, I would say. Your money takes you further there, although he is being paid in US dollars. So anyway, I think there's other things to consider. Obviously, everyone will bring up like taxation and all that crap.
I mean, even though Michigan's tax isn't great,
I know, but
I do want to also talk about the fact that I was just touching on forwards.
Yeah,
like, is Alex Debrincat next season going to be as good as Jake Sanderson? Like, Jake Sanderson is going to be nice with it. Thomas Chabot has been in a Norris conversation. The last year he had a down year, the first time ever. Like,
so for me, it's hard because it's like forward to defense, right? Like, to me,
absolutely.
I mean, I think we're straying a little bit away from talking about the trade, but I get your point. I think that when you look at Ottawa's like core players next year, yes, I think Debrincat, you could argue, is not in the top 3, 4, or potentially 5. So I get your point there, but I don't think comparing him with the defense, especially like Sanderson, we have 1 year of him. He had 32 points, which is by no means bad for a rookie. I was expecting him to get between 25 and 35 points. But I think that you're comparing a guy who already has over 400 points in his NHL career, to Sanderson, who has 32. And yes,
373, but
okay. So
give or take.
Fair enough. Maybe I meant NHL games. I couldn't remember the statistic.
Yeah, he's got 450 games.
Okay, so
I mean, all this to say, like, my point is that I think he wasn't going to be the guy.
No.
In Chicago, he and Patrick Kane were the guys, and I would say Debrincat was more useful than Patrick Kane was. But I think one thing, and to dunk on Dorion maybe just one more time, did he at all maybe just talk to the agent or talk to the GM or talk to the player and just be like, hey, like, do you want to play in Canada? Like,
so from my understanding, when Debrincat was traded here, I remember him talking about seeing how passionate Canadian fans were and stuff, and how the vibe was just different, how you saw like signs up for hockey tryouts and stuff all down the street, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Like he was talking up how it was a really different vibe. And I think initially he was pretty excited about it. My guess is that because he didn't really get a chance to play with Tim Stützle. And I think going into a contract year for him, if he'd been playing with Tim Stützle, obviously he would have lit it up. I mean, you look at Brady Tkachuk's numbers, and I think Brady Tkachuk's a hell of a player, but I think Brady Tkachuk and Claude Giroux, again, heck of a player, but I think they both benefited from Tim Stützle really taking off this year and becoming a star player. And that line was absolutely dynamite. And of course, why would DJ Smith break that up? But if you're Debrincat, you're looking at it and you're like, well, I got put on the second line and
with a rookie.
Yeah, Shane Pinto is a fine player, but he's not top 6 caliber yet. And so if you're Debrincat, you're being put with him. And Drake Batherson, I think, has way more than he showed this year, but he was recovering from a bad injury that he had suffered the prior season, and he wasn't fully on gear. So I think that they didn't click. He was getting good power play time. Maybe he just didn't like the setup. I know he said coaching was an issue and the teammates were an issue, but it seemed like initially he's like, I want to see the fit, and then like we'll see what happens. Obviously, in preseason, Kevin Weeks reported that there were talks about a potential long-term deal coming down the pipeline, and normally Kevin Weeks hits. That was a big miss on his part. And it happens, right? Like you said, contract situations are fluid. It didn't work out, and we know the end result. But I don't know. At the end of the day, whatever it was, I think when Dorion traded for him, there was no indication that he wouldn't sign in Canada. But I think just whatever happened as the season went on, maybe it was his own personal family decision once they had the newborn and everything, that with discussions with his wife, she was homesick, or maybe they both agreed having that support system for their child in the US with their family would be better for them. Like, I really don't know. I'm just speculating. But I'm sure there were a number of factors that went into it. At the end of the day, it's his choice to make. That's why restricted free agent, like, he has rights as a player. I think Dorion really, even though I was underwhelmed by the overall package, I still think he did a great job, considering he was essentially negotiating with the Detroit Red Wings and no one else. Like, it looked like Debrincat and his agent didn't want a deal anywhere else. So if you're Dorion, I think actually getting a first out of this trade is surprising. Like, I think that it could have been like a raked over the coals situation for him. So,
So last point then before we move on. Matt, team boo or team not boo?
Which Matt?
You.
Yeah, you got
turning it to you.
I was firmly on team not boo before his comments to Detroit's media and that presser. After that, I was on the fence. For me, I think it'll be an in the moment thing. I personally I probably will still lean towards not booing the guy, because it's a business, it's hockey. Like, I don't really hold anything personally against him. But if the vibe in the arena, like, people are booing him, I might jokingly do it. But
so the pair, if you jokingly do it, you're doing it. You will.
No, I know, but like I said, I'm leaning towards like I likely wouldn't, because
I think that's fair.
I'm indifferent.
Other Matt, team boo, team not boo. Oh, here we go.
The way I look at it is, in life, you have heroes and you got villains. And Alex Debrincat is now a villain in Ottawa. And like that guy is getting booed. And I will happily do it. Why? Because sports is supposed to be fun. I know he made a life decision. That's great. It directly affected my fandom. And now I'm going to boo him because that's the cycle of sports. You cheer when your team wins and you boo when your team gets scored on. It just so happens that a guy, little rat-faced mother, just decided he wanted to leave the Ottawa Senators, the greatest franchise on the entire goddamn planet, because he wanted to be a Detroit winged wheel Red Wing. So yeah, I'm going to boo him, and it's going to be fun because that's what sports is all about, having fun.
All right.
And Alex, I'm glad you got to where you wanted to go. It's great. I hope your family is happy. It's going to be wonderful. The Ottawa Senators are coming for you.
Who wants it, baby?
I just cut a promo on Alex Debrincat.
There we go.
Okay, well,
Benet, what are you doing?
Listen, Alex Debrincat has a new nickname in Ottawa, and that is persona non grata. And I know that he's been failed by the American education system. So that's Latin, and that means not welcome here. Person not welcome. Fuck that dude. I'm going to be booing him.
I love it. I love the use of the exceptional fuck there.
Okay, I guess me being slightly indifferent is the most.
I decided that before I even knew what he said today. I literally found out for the first time in this podcast that he was talking more shit today. No, I'm Team Boo.
Okay,
yeah,
fair enough.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, and you're more than welcome to that, and I love that for both of you.
Exactly. You are more than welcome.
That's
like whomever is out there listening, you're more than welcome to celebrate your fandom how you want to. Don't listen to people telling you, oh, don't boo them. Oh, boo them. Do whatever your heart tells you. Why? Because the Ottawa Senators are the live, laugh, love, baby.
You just gotta send them, you know?
Yeah, that's it.
People fought and died for your right to boo players that come back in town. So don't let that struggle be in vain.
Brady Tkachuk got bit by an inbred for this.
Okay, all right, boys. Settle down.
Next topic.
What the hell? Okay, so we're gonna.
That one kind of slipped out.
That's okay. This podcast it's a roller coaster. I love it. Okay, so on that note, transition is gonna be hard here. The first signing of Ottawa's free agency was Joonas Korpisalo. Now, this one was a controversial signing because it was a long-term deal, 5 years, $4 million average annual value. So that's $4 million cap hit. No signing bonuses, but Corpusalo does have a 10-team no trade clause for the entirety of the 5 years. So that is interesting. I mean, the nice thing about it is the contract is more front loaded. So hypothetically, if the Sens do need to buy it out, it'll be easier to buy out if it's in year 3, 4, potentially 5, you know? So I think Dorion looked at what happened with Matt Murray, where his was backloaded, and realized that really kind of put a wrench in the gears, if you will, of the Ottawa Senators when trying to move Matt Murray. And so I think with this deal, he's like, okay, let's front load so that, you know, Corpusalo is being paid more in his 29, 30, 31 years. And then once he's 32, 33, he'll be paid less. So that's what happened. This time I'll flip it to Other Matt. And Other Matt, what did you think of this move?
I honestly was kind of shocked that they went and got Corpusalo. It seemed like they really went big game fishing, and they got, you know, the hottest goalie commodity on the market. I say that only because it was a foregone conclusion that Tristan Jarry and Freddie Anderson were going back to their respective teams.
And Semyon Varlamov as well, going back to the Islanders.
Yeah, but he's 35. Like, he's not an option for Ottawa.
I think he's kind of, in my opinion, kind of like Craig Anderson, where he's just had a very steady, rock solid career. And I don't think age really is the biggest factor with him versus a guy like Cam Talbot, who didn't have that solid long career. But yeah, anyway, I'll let you keep making your point.
Yeah. And I like with Varlamov, I also figured he wasn't leaving, but he definitely wasn't that high on my priority list. Like Corpusalo was the only free agent goalie that sort of was the best option, but I definitely priced him out, especially in our earlier off-season goalie video. He wasn't one of my options because I thought, he was going to cost too much. And, Corpusalo coming in at a $4 million AAV is excellent. I think like that's a good number for a guy who just came off an excellent season for two teams. One was a defensive tire fire, and then a defensively stalwart level team with the LA Kings. Do I think the term was too much? Yeah, absolutely. I would have liked 4 max, 3 ideally, but it, as you said, it is buyout friendly, and I can get down with that. And one of the things that I really was able to get a feel for through some Twitter and articles about Corpusalo was that he's been playing his best hockey after his hip surgeries, and that he is no longer in constant pain, and he's able to do what his body can do without being hindered by pain. I think he definitely needed a fresh start off of Columbus because he was a middling guy there. They had Elvis, and he was always going to be the backup there, but you could see he could get to more. And he went to LA, played really well there. Yeah, he got cooked in the playoffs because they had to face McDavid. Like they're going to cook any goalie. I think his style is excellent. Like he is such an explosive and athletic goalie while still being like technically sound. There's a lot of good here. The only question I really have is the term. Like I don't have a ton of issue with the 4 million. If it was lower, great. But the term, the 5 years is a little much for me. But I would probably say we got the best available goalie on the market.
Yeah, and I have some comments, but I'm going to let Benet get his 2 cents in. And what did you think of that signing?
Yeah, it's hard for me to nail down exactly how I feel about this. I mean, I think the contract is not good. I think that we went through a lot of effort last summer to offload Murray's contract and then just walked into another Murray contract. It's like the AAV is lower, but the term is higher. And, and for a guy who has only really put together a couple of good seasons in his career, is worrying to me. That being said, like you were saying, Matt, there were not a lot of other options out there. It's a pretty thin market for goalies this year. Most teams were not selling. If guys were free agents, most of them seemed to sign where they were already. So that makes it difficult. I think that the Sens were in a tough position because, there was no way we were bringing Talbot back. We had no one else in the pipe that could step up. We really didn't have much of a choice but to go out for a guy like Corpusalo and take a flyer. But just like, man, every year it just seems like we're just like putting our faith in like a reclamation project for a goaltender, trying to hope that they might be the guy. And, goalies are voodoo. Nobody knows if a goaltender's stat line is going to go up, down, sideways, or in circles, least of all your average NHL GM or your average NHL fan. But just like, I really wish that we didn't need to be, praying to the goalie gods that, we're going to go out and sign a guy and they're just going to magically put together a better season than they've ever had. Because that's just not the way that I want to try and build our teams. And I know it's hard because good goalies are very difficult to acquire because teams grab on tight and don't let go. But it's just like, I just really wish that we had a better option. But, so it is what it is.
So for me, at first, I was like, whoa, that's a lot of term. But then you look at free agent signings, generally they get either paid too much or they get too much term. And I think with Ottawa, Korpisalo,
Miles Wood.
way too much term. But anyway, you look at a team like Ottawa. First of all, they need like a true starting goalie, or at least like a 1A and a 1A 1B tandem. Forsberg, I think, is good enough as a backup, but the injury history, I think, was concerning for the Sens. Obviously, Talbot wasn't cutting it. I think Sogard is getting there, but he's not NHL ready yet. I think he's got at least another year to go. We'll see. And I think, you look at a guy like Corpusalo, in his rookie year, obviously had a 920. And then from there, he had games where 14 games in season, 18, 27. Finally, the first season where he gets more than that and gets a 37 game sample, which is, I think, fairly reasonable for a guy in a tandem. He ends up getting his 911 save percentage. And then the next two seasons are an 894 and 877. And it was at the end of that 877 season, which wasn't great, where that was announced that he had a hip issue. He had been trying to play through it for quite some time, whatever that means, according to the GM, and finally elected to have surgery on it. So he gets surgery on it. He goes into the season with Columbus, and all of a sudden, he's got a 911 save percentage like he had a couple years prior. And then he goes to a defensively sound LA team, and then he puts up a 921 save percentage there before, like Matt said, getting Draisaitl and McDavid in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Not much you can really do there for any goalie, but so essentially what I'm saying is I think the hip issues really played into how detrimental on his playing abilities. I worded that probably a little odd, but essentially I think the injury had a lot to do with his poor stats is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of faith that he can bounce back. I think if you look at Ottawa's defensive core this season versus last season, it looks a hell of a lot better. I think Holden was okay in the first half of the season and started to trail off. So no Holden. Hamonic won't be playing, I think, 20 plus minutes a night with Sanderson this year. You have a top four of Chabot, Zub, who Zub also declined after his injury in December last year. So you have hopefully a healthy Chabot, healthy Zub, healthy Chychrun, and then you have Jake Sanderson in his sophomore season. I think that top four immediately gives you a lot better defensive results. And Chabot had an abysmal year defensively. I think he'll bounce back, especially with his numbers being better monitored, with more help being in there. And then on your bottom pairing, if Brandstrom and Hamonic is your bottom pairing, that's fine by me because Brandstrom had a really good year. Offensively, he started to show he could chip in. And I think defensively, he had his best season of his career. So he keeps that up. And I think the defensive core is better. Forward wise, like we mentioned earlier, I think at least depth wise, it's better this year. Last year you had Gambrell and Kelly, and I know I'm forgetting names. There's going to be guys who I don't even know that were here for a stint. I think like Rourke Chartier. You had guys like that. And I think now that you have depth players who, for the most part, in my opinion, can play the position, I think that'll help Korpisalo's game quite a bit. So that's kind of my take. I'm being the optimistic one, maybe foolishly optimistic. I did tell people on Twitter that the last time I went out and got a goalie jersey after a goalie came to Ottawa was Craig Anderson. And that went quite well for the Ottawa Senators. So it looks like I got to go out and get a Corpusalo jersey and try to make that same magic happen here. And hopefully it doesn't age like that guy who tried to sell his Matt Murray jersey on Reddit after Murray's first season in Ottawa, because he didn't get many takers on that.
Yeah. Talk about depreciating assets like we were mentioning earlier. I just listen. I mean, I think that I really want Corpusalo to succeed. And I think the Sens have a better defensive core than we've had in years. And that's really great. I just think that like on a good team, Corpusalo is like your backup or your 1B. And like if Corpusalo is your plan A, like the plan sucks. That's just like, that's just my attitude. Like
I don't know.
I think that he can and he will be good, but I just you need better than him to be a contender. And
I don't think that's true. You look at Colorado, they won with Darcy Kempfer. You look at Vegas, they won with Aiden Hill, who got hot for the playoffs.
But you can't plan for that. That's the problem. Is like, if you'd asked Vegas at the start of this season who their guy was, they would have said, Robin Lehner, and if something happens to him, I guess Logan Thompson. Like, you can't legislate for a scenario where your third string goalie gets hot in June, right? You can't plan for that. That's the problem. It's like good teams have good goaltenders that are good all year long and are good at the playoffs. And and those guys are hard to come by, and the Sens don't have that. Like even it's in the same in Pittsburgh with like the Murray and Fleury situation. Like Fleury was their guy, and they got backed into a corner where they had to play Murray, and it worked out for them. But that was not their plan, and that's the problem. It's like you can't legislate for a situation where you throw in a goalie who's untested and they surprise everyone, and you carry them to a cup. Like it happens, but it doesn't happen on purpose.
Yeah,
And
but I think Ottawa needed to fix their goaltending, and they went out and got the best free agent goalie on the market. Like, I think that if you go into a trade, who are you going to trade with to get what goalie? Like Jeremy Swayman's an RFA, so you could offer sheet him, but he's got a sample size of like 2 seasons. I just don't think there are really a lot of options out there.
The option was to take Wallstat 2 years ago.
Yeah, but you can't go back now, right? So you gotta do what you can. I mean, I would have, that was a head scratcher at the time for sure. But what can you do?
I think one of the funny things is I know that Corpusalo has played more games than him, but Forsberg has strung together more consistent years than he has thus far. But with that said, and I think something that's kind of cool is these guys won a Calder Cup in the AHL together, and they're still very good friends. And I think if Forsberg comes back, and he will be coming back completely healthy, I think that's going to drive a healthy competition between them, and it's going to promote pushing each other. And we haven't really had that in the last couple of years, because it sort of was Matt Murray's crease, and then it wasn't, and then it was Forsberg crease because Matt Murray could not cut the mustard. And last year it was supposed to be Cam Talbot and Forsberg's crease, and then DJ Smith happened, and it just stayed Cam Talbot. I really would like to see in the first 10 games, unless one guy has 930 save percentage every single game, I want them split between the two, because that's how you're going to find out who's going to cut it and who's not. And consistent tandeming until somebody takes the reins in the latter part of the season. Benet, I don't think you're wrong in the sense that, if Corpusalo is your 1A goalie, it's probably not the best option, but he's currently the only option we had, other than giving up assets that we probably can't afford to give up. So you give up some cap space and you hope for the best, the old Pierre Dorion way.
All right, so after the break, we'll discuss Ottawa's signing of Zack MacEwen, which was also a controversial one, whether Jake Sanderson could be signing an extension this summer with the Ottawa Senators, and the odds of Vladimir Tarasenko coming to the nation's capital. So tune into the second half and we'll discuss all those topics. Hey, Sens fans, it's baseball season, and new customers who download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN can bet just $5 and score $150 in bonus bets instantly. That's code THPN only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Massachusetts, call 800-327-5050 or visit gamblinghelpline.ma.org. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Kansas, call 1-800-522-4700 on behalf of Boot Hill Casino Resort, Kansas. In West Virginia, gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. All games regulated by the West Virginia Lottery. Please play responsibly. In partnership with Hollywood Casino at Charlestown Races. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 21 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. 1 boost per eligible game. Opt-in required. Max bet $50. 10 plus leg required for 100% boost. Eligibility, wagering, and deposit restrictions apply. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/baseball terms. Welcome back, everyone. If you've liked the podcast so far, please make sure to drop us a follow on Twitter or now on Threads at Senstennial or The Senstennial, respectively. And please give us a sub if you've enjoyed the content so that you can catch more of it in the future. Really appreciate it. With that, let's get on with the show. Next up, we're talking about the other free agency signing the Ottawa Senators made, and that would be the 3-year deal they gave to Zack MacEwen, which was league minimum $775,000. Benet, I know you're dying to get on this one. What did you think about Ottawa signing Zack MacEwen?
Yeah, I mean, there were two head scratchers in Sens free agency. I mean, Corpusalo, we just talked about, we knew that like that had to be done, so is what it is. But the Hamnick extension and the Zack MacEwen signing. I think the Zack MacEwen, 3 years league minimum, it's pretty low risk. It's a move that's unlikely to make the Sens worse. It as equally unlikely to make the Sens better. It's just, I'm not really sure what they're going for here. This is a guy that has, this is gonna sound really harsh, and like I know this guy's better at hockey than I'll ever be, but it's just like, this is a guy with virtually no skills other than being an enforcer. He had 9 points last year. 46 games played. And yeah, I just don't really. I think like there's been a lot of discourse on Twitter about the role of enforcers on teams and everything, and it's like I think like we all take the point that physicality matters, and having guys that aren't afraid to drop the gloves or to lay guys out on the other team, that's important. But I think that we're past the point where there's a point to having guys on your team that only do that. I think if you look at the rosters of Stanley Cup contenders, there's not a lot of out and out goons anymore. Like guys like, Tom Wilson, Radko Gudas, like Barclay Goodrow. Like these guys have skills other than just being physical. Like they have, they have offensive upside. They can score. They can be responsible defensively. They can kill penalties. Like I just don't really think that McEwen is a guy that does those things. I think he's literally just like a guy on skates who throws punches, and I just don't see what the utility of that is in the modern game. I don't know.
Yeah, somebody made a really interesting point that there wasn't a fighting major after the second round of the playoffs this year. And to a point, like, I don't really think fighting's that important. I know it happens and like it riles people up. Everybody loves seeing somebody get punched in the face. And when we were at the Detroit back-to-back, and everybody, they were getting in fights left, right, and center, like the place was bumping. And there's something to be said about that. Giving a guy who his skill level leaves a lot to be desired on the offensive side. His career high in points was actually this year with 10 points. I don't particularly want that on my fourth line, only because I think there are better hockey players out there that are currently unsigned that we probably could have got for maybe a little more than what we paid Zack MacEwen. This isn't to say that there isn't a role for physicality and fighting in the league, because it's still prevalent. But like when I see people like belittling people's intelligence because they think that fighting and physicality is way more important to the game than big brain folks like us apparently think analytics and actual skill is important. Like I don't need to be told I need to go to a hockey school to learn hockey. I'm pretty sure I know how to play it and I know how to watch it.
Yeah. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to determine whether 10 points is good. Is 10
Yeah.
points for an NHL player good? I don't know. You write us in and let us
It's
know.
a hell of a lot better than I am at the NHL game, truthfully. I know that 10 points is tough. But at the same time,
had to battle for everyone.
Yeah, Parker Kelly had 4 last season. And we all know how we feel about Parker Kelly. So let's double what he put out. And it's still not good. Like, I think there are guys that are still free agents that absolutely should be on our fourth line ahead of this guy. I'm willing to be wrong, though. But it's really bad when I see people being like, yeah, actually, Austin Watson is an upgrade on this guy.
So I'll drop my take in here. So the guy just turned 27, right? So he's not a super old player. He actually hasn't had a ton of time in the NHL. Am I saying that he has upside to his game? Probably not. As the infamous Alfie line, he doesn't play on the penalty kill. Watson played on the penalty kill. I'm sure that if in Ottawa, DJ would put him on the penalty kill because, of course, big tough boy equals penalty killer is good. In the past 2 seasons, he has had over 150 or more hits in the last 2 seasons. So, of course, that's Ottawa style hockey, baby. I think when you look at Boston, they signed Milan Lucic 2 year. You look at Toronto, they signed Ryan Reeves to 3 years, which who knows if he'll even play out those 3 years in Toronto, but that's what his contract is at 1.3 mil, mind you. And you look at Montreal with Arbor Xhekaj. I think when you take into account all the games that the Sens will play against rivals this year, just those 3 teams, I believe it'll be 10 games. 3 against the Habs, 3 against the Bruins, 4 against the Maple Leafs. When you have a guy like Ryan Reeves or Arbor Xhekaj in the lineup, Milan Lucic, I think that it is good to have a guy that'll drop the gloves who isn't Brady Tkachuk. When you have Brady Tkachuk, because let's remember, I know everyone's like, oh, they're on different lines. Let's not forget that when in Toronto, when in Boston, when in Montreal, home team gets last change. They can for sure put on a guy like Arbor Xhekaj to play against Brady Tkachuk when Brady Tkachuk goes out there. There's nothing stopping them. And in fact, Ottawa plays Montreal 3 times this season, like I said, twice in Montreal. So Montreal does get the advantage in terms of those line changes. And I know it seems so small, but if you put out a guy like Arbor Xhekaj and he drops the gloves with Brady Tkachuk's a feisty guy. He's not going to back down. Even if he probably shouldn't take the fight, he's that kind of player. So then you have a guy like him who drops the gloves. Now he's in the box for 5 minutes while Xhekaj's in the box. Xhekaj doesn't play defense. Look at his advanced analytics. Look at him play the game. He's not a good defenseman. And I'm sure if my girlfriend could hear me talking trash about Xhekaj right now, she'd bust through the door and kick my butt like Xhekaj. But
and call you a Xhekaj in the process.
Maybe a jackass, but yeah. So you have guys like that who literally they don't add anything. Milan Lucic, does he really add anything in his career anymore? No. So I think when you get a guy like Zack MacEwen, you don't have a Scott Sabrin in the organization anymore. Austin Watson, love the man, love what he did here. Papa bless his heart, but he's not a fighter. So Zack MacEwen, he doesn't have the best fighting record, but it's better than Austin Watson's. And I think Ottawa just basically came in, signed him to that cheap contract, which they can bury in the minors, by the way, if they want. I know he's on a one-way contract, so he's getting paid $775, whether he's in the NHL or AHL. He can still be put on waivers. He doesn't have a no-move clause. So that money can be buried in the minors. He can play in the AHL. I doubt anybody's going to claim him. And then you can call him up for those games against Toronto or Montreal where you want him to just go big box mode and punch the heads, And I think on the fourth line, you're still improving by having guys like Smejkal, Kastelik with good line mates, hopefully, and maybe Ridley Gregg on that line, or if Ridley Gregg is on the third line and Joseph's on the fourth. I think the combinations are better for having depth that'll not be like Gambrell and Parker Kelly. So that's really my take on it. I don't think he'll be a mainstay in the lineup. I think he'll be a 13th forward. I know some people are saying, is DJ Smith going to use him as a 13th forward? I have concerns about that too. I won't lie. However, if he's used properly, I understand the signing. I'm not gung-ho about it. I'm like you, Matt. I would have liked to see them sign maybe a guy like Fialbi or Pius Suter for that fourth line, defensive forwards who give you something, right? But at the end of the day, I understand why they made the signing, silly as it is to us. So that's my spiel. You guys are welcome to add your 2 cents if you have anything else you want to add, but that's just kind of my spiel, my tangent on that.
I said what I want to say, but I just want to go back and just say to Nath that like I totally agree. It's like I hate the attitude that like not liking guys who are pure goons and don't bring anything else to the table means you somehow don't understand hockey, or like your takes are invalid because like you don't know what it's like in a locker room. It's like, look at me with a straight face and tell me 10 points is good. Like Mark Mathot, I'm fucking calling you out. Come to my house and look at me in my face and tell me 10 points is good.
Like, I'm pretty positive Mathot had more than 10 points in the season.
Yeah,
probably.
He did.
And like Mathot was a great defenseman.
You were talking about Milan Lucic. Lucic had 19 points last year and like is a big character guy.
And people were talking about him being an absolute anchor to the lineup.
Yeah. Yeah, he had 19 points and people were still talking about him like he's a fucking Make-A-Wish kid that got to play in the lineup because like he's like is like dying of cancer or something. Like, you know, and it's like people were still talking about him that way. And it's like this guy had 10 points last year and that was a good year for him. And this is the guy we wanted to go out and acquire. It's just like it's medieval, man. It's like we're living through the fucking plague. Like we lived through the plague. And now it's still in like the high Middle Ages. You know, we're gonna one day soon we'll hit the Renaissance, and you know shit will turn around. But it's just like I hate that attitude, man.
And I think what's even funnier is go look at Vegas's defense. Look how many big guys there are. It's like, guys, let me just put this into perspective for you. A 5'9" small king just won playoff MVP. Why? Because his stuff mattered. He showed up. He was the most skilled player out there and he killed it. But like nobody's talking about the fighters and stuff. Like they're talking about the skilled players. At the end of the day, nobody's going to talk about Zack MacEwen when Tim Stützle is dangling Sidney Crosby again. Like, if Zack MacEwen gets 40 games, it is what it is. I agree. But I wish there were just better fighter physical options that, could put up more than what he has.
And I just want to go on record and say I'm not disagreeing with you guys. I think there were better depth options.
No, that's fine.
I totally understand why they made the move, even if I personally don't think it was a wise decision. I think that given the circumstances, if they were giving him Reeves money, I'd be like, okay, that's kind of dumb. But I mean, next year cap is going up potentially $4 to $5 million. Ottawa's also shedding like $5 million off their books in dead cap and bad contracts, buyout money going away. Plus, next offseason, they get a $625K cap credit from the Colin White buyout, which is a one-time credit, but hey, whatever. So that almost covers all of Zack MacEwen's contract. So it's like, and plus burying the money in the minors, you can bury up to 1.15 mil of NHL money in the minors. So to me, it's like negligible. Like, sure, it's a useless use of money, I guess. But hey, Michael Andlauer signed those checks. I don't think he really cares as much as the last guy. Does.
Yeah.
But anyway, talking about contracts and long term, let's talk about Jake the Snake Sanderson, baby. Gary Hawk's latest article about Alex Debrincat and not wanting to be in Ottawa, he snuck in a little tidbit that Jake Sanderson could be sitting down with the Ottawa Senators soon and maybe having some contract negotiation discussions. And that doesn't mean that something's going to get done this summer, but I did pick up on that and want to talk to you guys about that contract and what you may think it comes in at, what the term looks like. So, Matt, I kicked it off to you last. So, or actually, I kicked off to Benet. So I guess I'll go to Matt for this one, and then we'll go over to Benet.
Honestly, like I don't have a lot to say on this the Sanderson thing. Obviously, it's an extremely important thing to get done. Having more cap space to make it feasible, super important. I think Jake Sanderson could end up being the best defenseman this team has, and that's saying something with Thomas Chabot, Jacob Chikrin, Eric Brandstrom. But at the end of the day, like he's going to be a mainstay on this team for a lot of years, and let's hope they can get a really team friendly while also player friendly deal. And like I love the guy. He's an exceptional defenseman and he's just going to get better.
Yeah, Bennett, how are you feeling about this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty cut and dry case. You want to sign him to an 8-year contract if you can. He's a cornerstone of this franchise's rebuild. You know, he and Tim Stutzler went 3-5 in the 2020 draft. You know, they are the rocks on which we will build our church, and you know we've got to get them locked in. I think I'm not going to speculate too hard about a number because I think it'll just look foolish, but I think it'll be, you know, maybe in like the 6 range is what I would expect. I think like Chabot got that, you know, 8x8 for being the first one to really commit to the rebuild. I think if that contract were to be signed today, he might get something more like 7. So I'm thinking, you know, someone like Sanderson who, you know, has a really well-rounded game. He's great defensively. He's smart. He's intelligent. He has some offensive upside, and we're hopefully going to see more of that in coming years. I think that, you know, something in like the $5.5-6 million range would be very fair, and I think not unrealistic. I think that if he pushes himself into like the Brady, Norris, you know, Chabot to Chuck kind of like strata, the team would be being taken to the cleaners a little bit. But I mean, I think we all agree, whatever the number is, we want to see this guy locked up for 8 years, and we hope we get a deal. But even if we don't, we'll fucking do it anyway because he's a great player and we need him on the team.
Yeah, and I'm sure Pierre Dorion wants to get him signed long term, like he did with Stützle last summer. Stützle's contract's going to age like a fine wine. That is a nice number to lock him in at. After this past season, if he had waited just one summer, we'd be talking 10+ mil for Tim Stützle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And think about our cap situation then, right? So I think when you're talking Jake Sanderson, I think 6.5 is the low end of what he'll make. And I just think that because of his age, his projectability, if they sign him before the season starts, I think 6.5 to 7.5, maybe 8, but I doubt they go that high, would be fair for, you know, a long-term agreement. If they do end up waiting as the season goes, and let's say Jake Sanderson has a 45-point season, I think, and like a good responsible defensive season like he had this past year, and starts getting like second line power play minutes or whatever, then I think that he could start asking for around that 8 number, potentially higher, depending on how he does in comparison to Chabot. So that'll be interesting. And I also think that'll set the kind of expectation for maybe Chikrin going forward too, because he's got 2 years left, and then who knows what he'll want. So for me, I think 6.5 to 7.5 is fair. I've seen some people suggest 9-10 million, and I'm like, guys, listen, he had 32 points in his rookie season. Yes, he's very good defensively. I'm sorry, but unless you're Cale Makar, you're not getting a contract near 10 million. It's just not going to happen. If you're a forward, you'll get that money. If you're a defenseman, it's just not right now in the NHL. That's just not the contract money they're giving out. And anyway, so I made a bet with someone that if Sanderson if he doesn't sign this offseason and he signs next offseason and he gets 10 mil, I'll buy them a Jake Sanderson jersey because it won't happen on the Ottawa Senators. So that's my thing. But hey, if they sit down, sign him 8 years between 6.5, 7.5, I think that'll age well. And Ottawa will really solidify their top 4 for at least the next, I'd say, 4 years if they eventually extend Chikrin as well. But the last topic we'll get to, Vladimir Tarasenko. So this was an interesting one. It kind of was happening in the background while all the Debrincat buildup was going on. So it seemed like Tarasenko was between Ottawa and Carolina, and everyone's like, okay. And then it was rumored that he was going to Carolina, and then all of a sudden it wasn't happening. And then he fired his agent, got a new agent. And then it was like discussed that he was waiting for Debrincat to be traded because then Ottawa would focus their attention on signing him. Now it seems like it's Ottawa, Carolina, San Jose, and Florida who are the front runners. Apparently, Tarasenko's looking at a 1-year deal, which I think makes sense for him and for a team looking to bring him in. You know, he does have injury history. He's a good goal scorer, not the best defensively, but he's got a lot of experience, playoff experience as well. I mean, for 1 year, I think, especially for the Sens, it makes sense if you want to bridge top six forward now that you've lost to Brincat. And I think for the player, it makes sense because a lot of teams don't have money to spend right now. Even Carolina, if they wanted to sign Tarasenko, they're going to have to move some money out. Looks like Ottawa will have to do the same. So it's an interesting scenario. But for the player, he's basically doing what Klingberg did last summer, banking on himself, having a good year. And then next summer, when the cap goes up and teams have more flexibility, he might be able to get like a 4 or 5 year deal and cash in. So interesting rumor, but I'll throw it to you guys. And, what do you think about this? And we'll start with Benet.
I don't hate the idea. I mean, like, I'm gonna be totally honest. I absolutely think he is washed. I don't think there's but like, if it's a 1-year deal, it's like kind of like I would take a flyer on that, right? Like, 1 year for a guy who scored 30, 40 goals, whenever he's healthy, pretty much. I'll take that, slot him in beside Norris and Batherson, see what he can do. I don't hate that. Like you said, a bridge kind of like solution to figuring out what we want to do with our top six post Debrincat. I think there are worse options out there. I think there are better options out there, guys who I think I have more confidence in their ability to stay healthy and still score at the clip that they're known for. But I wouldn't hate the acquisition. And I do want to say, I mean, like, I think you see whenever there's like European players and like Russians in particular, you see all this like nonsense about attitude problems and character issues and stuff. I mean, like, everything I've seen about Tarasenko said he's a stand-up guy. I mean, like, you have to look no further than Artem Zub for like great character guys who are, Russian and on the team. And it's like, who cares about the nationality? Good players are good, and it's good to acquire players that are good. That's my hot take.
What? Wow, that's incredible, dude.
Shocker by Benet here.
And I will say, the injury discussion, that's definitely a point of concern. He played 69 games this past season, which is fine. The season before that, he did play 75 games and he did have 82 points. So he's only one season removed from an over point per game season. But like you said, Benet, the injuries, obviously, it's like, which Tarasenko will you get in Ottawa? So, Matt, what's your opinion on that?
I just don't really think we're going to be able to fit him in cap wise. I think it's kind of cool that one of the top free agents is interested in Ottawa. I think Tatar is probably a better fit with our current lineup just because he's more of a playmaker, better defensively. Like, that's sort of what we need on our second line.
Yeah.
Tarasenko is probably going to command more money than what we're willing to pay. And I just I don't really think he moves the needle that much for me personally. And, as I said, getting Tatar would be much more beneficial to the roster. And frankly, he's younger and is going to be, is he younger actually?
No, Tatar is actually like a year older.
Yeah. So, but he plays like he's younger and it feels like he is younger because it doesn't feel like he's hit a plateau and is sort of, falling off a cliff. I hope I'm wrong and he comes in at a crisp 2.5 million, but there's not a chance that happens. So
and I think the other difference, like, Tatar got no power play, barely any power play time this year. and still managed to put up 48 points in 82 games. So that's pretty decent. Had really good analytics, and I'll try and throw his hockey viz chart onto the video when we post it. The only thing is, playoff wise, Tarasenko has had playoff success. Tatar has not. And I know Ottawa has to make the playoffs before you talk about playoff performances. So I think Tatar is a guy who could help you get to the playoffs. Once you get there, I think some carrying needs to be done to have him produce. Whereas Tarasenko, I think it's more injuries are your concern in the regular season. But if he's healthy going into the playoffs, you aren't worried about his production. So it's like, it's the pros and cons of players. I mean, they're obviously the two, like I'd say Tatar, is probably the less attractive top six option in most people's eyes because his name is not as heavy hitting. And, I think a lot of people still remember him from Montreal and think, he was washed or what have you. But in general, I think Ottawa will try and fill that gap. And I think if Kubalik's your third line left wing, I personally think the depth is looking a hell of a lot better going into next season than this past season. But I don't want to speak for all of us. So on that note, I'll ask, basically summarized, how are we feeling after free agency, after the Debrincat trade? While there still may be a signing to go, and if something happens, we'll make another video. But, I'll kick it to you, Benet. How are you feeling about the offseason moves so far?
I think that the Sens' most important off-season moves are a healthy Norris and a healthy Chychrun. Because I think with the goaltending market being what it was, and with Debrincat demanding a trade as he did, there was little opportunity for this team to get better. I think that Dorion would have really had to pull some magic rabbit shit to get the team ahead of where they were compared to last year, this offseason. But I don't think we got worse, which is good. And I think that the biggest and most important acquisitions, one of the biggest and most important acquisitions happened last year when we landed Chychrun. That's a big upgrade to our blue line. One of the biggest and most important acquisitions will be a healthy Josh Norris. Mashallah, let it happen. I'm not 100% convinced he can stay healthy for a whole season, but I really hope he does, because if he doesn't, oh boy, are we in for a world of hurt. If we can get somebody to fill in on that second line, be it any of the T's, Tarasenko, Tatar, those are the only T players that I can think of. But if we can get some help on that second line to try and fill Debrincat's shoes, then I think we've got something. I think our goaltending won't be worse. It might be better. It might be a lot better, but we don't know. But I don't know. I think that this team, I think it would have been really difficult after the way this offseason started for the team to come out ahead. But there's one final acquisition that we haven't talked about, and that's new ownership. And much as, we're sitting here griping about signings we don't necessarily agree with and draft picks we coulda, shoulda, woulda made, we hope that in the years to come, with more investment into our front office and our scouting and everything, that fewer mistakes like that'll happen. So that's the best acquisition we could have made.
Honestly, I wish that was the ending point, because that was great. But other Matt, I'll grab your thoughts on this offseason so far.
I gotta say, I absolutely was way more hyped going into the season last year than I am this year.
Yeah.
Obviously, we took a bit of an L in the Debrincat trade this year as opposed to the last one. But I still think we're probably at a better point, simply because of, if we're looking at a healthy Norris and a healthy Debrincat, those were the two guys that were there from last season, but now you're hoping for a healthy Norris. But if you also have a healthy Chychrun, that's a guy that was in a Norris conversation and got Norris votes. He is a beast when he's on, and is an excellent defenseman. And I think we have a little more stability in net this season. It's a bit of a bummer that Cam Talbot didn't work out, So I'm probably going to say I'm cautiously optimistic. And I think it mostly comes down to what the F is going to happen with Coach DJ Smith.
And yeah, that's certainly a question that some people have on their minds. I guess I'll take the ending thoughts here. I think you both said it really well, but for me, health is the number one thing that the Sens need next season. Look at last year. I believe they used 7 different goaltenders in the NHL. Um, you know, our buddy there, Josh Norris, played a full 8 games. He probably spent more time tweeting from the Sens admin account than he did on the ice. So him being back and healthy, Chychrun being back and healthy, a healthy Batherson now that he's had more just ample amounts of time now to really heal. Zoo being fully healed now that he's not coming back from his injury in December. Even Matthew Joseph, who was injured in the November, December-ish timeframe, he didn't really look too great coming back. I think all of those health injuries, Anton Forsberg, him coming back, there's just so many. And I understand every team has injuries, but it just felt like anytime Ottawa was making progress, another big guy went down, and it just sucked. Tom Chabot, another one with injury. So it's like you got to get some wins on that front. And if that Kachuk, Stützle, Giroux line can be friggin' money like they were this season, and the health stays, I would say, close to 80-90%, this team has to make the playoffs. And they'll figure out that top 6 spot. That's my one concern with this roster, which is shocking considering how many concerns I've had over the past few years. The fact that my only concern is a top 6 forward now, I'm pretty happy with where the team's at. So, signing, Mike Tyson for the 4th line aside, and stuff like that. I'm looking forward to this season. You're like Matt. I'm not as hyped as last offseason, the summer of Pierre, but hopefully this season is I don't know. Empire Strikes Back. I don't know what to say, but I guess we'll see when it all comes down in October. We're a few months away, and I guess we'll see what happens when the time comes. So on that note, go Sens go. Let's see how this offseason shakes up. And hopefully the Sens will be kicking some ass come the fall.
Yeah. Let's hope. Go Sens go, baby.